I've got lots of style, got my gold diamond rings. She's so funny. And she's so good at innuendos. I can go for miles if you know what I mean. Hello, croeso I, welcome to Welsh Wednesdays. I'm Kiri Pritchard-McLean and this is Katie Gill-Williams and Williams. I don't know why I said it like that.
Williams.
Katie Gill-Williams, yeah. And we are two friends and Welsh learners from North Wales, and every week we pick a iconic Welsh subject to talk about in English, and at the end we try and have a little sgwrs bach in Welsh. And this week we're talking about the iconic Shirley Bassey.
I feel like I've let her down a little bit. I've gone leopard, but the hair is too flat. This is why I'm almost Shirley. I've just got a touch, but she would not tolerate this shit.
Yeah, well, I don't think Shirley would be sparkles from the waist up and then a pair of leggings with a hole in it that you can see her knickers through, because that's what I'm rocking right now. Really excited to talk about her. I didn't know loads about her before. I kind of knew what she stood for and that she's iconic to Wales, to to queer people. She's a huge gay icon. And also she is a really prominent celebrity, not even celebrity, she's a singer-songwriter of dual heritage, which is really important in Britain. So yeah, I knew those things about her, but I didn't quite understand her life, and it's going to be quite tricky to talk about actually, because she's been very guarded, and you have to strike the balance between talking about it and being respectful to what she once shared at the same time. But you know, as much as I love Shirley, I don't think she's on the Welsh Wednesdays bandwagon just yet.
When I was thinking about her, actually, you know those people who feel like they've been in your life, your whole life. You just know their face. You're not necessarily like, I don't have a back catalogue, or I didn't really grow up watching her or anything, but I feel like I've known her all my life, and I could even, she's that famous, I could probably like think of a mannerism or something. She's that level of stardom, really.
Yeah, she's so famous. She can be a tax exile in Monaco and I still love her.
She is in Monaco. Is that a tax haven, is it?
Yeah, she's there so she doesn't have to pay tax. And
do you know what? I kind of like her even more for it. Tiger Bay she's from, right?
Yes, which always gets mentioned is that, you know, the girl with the big voice, the little girl with a big voice from Tiger Bay. And that's really interesting to think about how that narrative's been framed. And she has, you know, she's quite guarded about her upbringing, but it's because Tiger Bay comes with all sorts of, right or wrongly, connotations. She was born in 1937, January the 8th. So at that time, Tiger Bay was known for being a big, like, mixed community, very racially diverse, very multicultural, and also it was known as a red light district as well. So that was also where a lot of the sex workers were. So it's easy to see why someone like Shirley, who's, you know, like, she's knocking on a bit as well. She'll be a bit hair and fash, and she, you know, her whole thing is exuding like control and glamour. Why she wouldn't necessarily want to be like, my roots in Tiger Bay, because that meant a very different thing back then. Although Tiger Bay was apparently, I've read this somewhere, the first port in the UK for a free black man to land in. So a man that wasn't, you know, an enslaved person. That the first free black man came to Cardiff. Yeah, her dad was Jamaican and he worked in the Navy on the ships, and then met her mum, and they had Shirley. Now, he was extradited when she was 2 years old because he was found guilty of child abuse charges. So she didn't really grow up with him. And then her mum got another guy who would have been around a lot when she was growing up, who probably was more of a father figure, but he worked on the ships as well. He was from Sierra Leone and he worked on the ships. And she says, there's a quote where she says something like, my father was this man who I barely recognized, a stranger who would turn up at the house every few months and expect me to hug and kiss him. So this really weird thing of not having a male figure around, because she's also sort of mentioned she always used to go for older men, and she was like, oh, it must be because I didn't have a father figure growing up. So she's got quite a kind of like, I guess maybe not that unusual at the time, but what we would perceive as being like, gosh, well, the dad's been extradited and there's prison there, and and then there's another guy that she didn't see very much, and then that guy, her what would have been her father for a lot of her childhood, he gets in a fight with the mum. The mum is repeatedly hitting him over the head with a shoe, and he pulls a gun on her, and the kids bundle him out, and a shot goes off, and he's going to go to trial for attempted murder, and he dies waiting to go for the trial. So they have this, just you would never know that to look at how Shirley Bassey carries herself. She literally carries herself like she's from nobility, which she is. Like, I'm not saying she's that there's these your people are born and deserve things, but like she's just got this like amazing grace, and to go through everything she's gone through and exude that, I think is absolutely amazing. So they moved then, the family, from Tiger Bay to Splot. The fact that they were a largely dual heritage family, because she's one of 7, wasn't a big thing in Tiger Bay, and it was more apparent in Splot, although when she was asked about it in sort of like the 60s and 70s, she said, my race wasn't the thing that affected how people treated me or my upbringing. She said it was a 4-letter word, and it was food. She said that was her biggest worry when she was growing up, that they were so poor that it was like, where's the food going to come from? At 16, becomes pregnant, and she has her first daughter, who gets called Sharon. Love it. And then they did what a lot of families did at the time. If there was a young unwedded girl, the baby was brought up as their sister. So Sharon was raised as Dame Shirley's sister, and then by this time Shirley's starting to play the clubs and things, has got this incredible talent that her family almost sort of don't understand. They're sort of like, where's that come from? And it's just coursing through her veins, and she's doing the clubs and like really catching people's attention, and she does her apprenticeship on like the working men's clubs and things, but fairly quickly gains notoriety for a few things that are career makers. So her career makers are playing the Double Diamond in Caerphilly, which is like an iconic club, and she played in front of Prince Charles there. Double Diamond is also such a cool name for a club, and loads of brilliant artists like Tom Jones came through the Double Diamond. She broke America on the Ed Sullivan Show, although only had one number one hit over in America. And I'd say the other thing that she's probably most known for is she's kind of the voice of Bond. She's done 3 Bond songs. Do you know which ones they are? Which films?
Goldfinger. Goldfinger.
Think about what you associate with like wealthy, with wealth.
Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah. And you'll never guess the other one, Moonraker.
I think Bond, and I think Shirley Bassey, and like singing out the side of her mouth to Bond.
Yeah.
Just big glitz, glamour. But the kind of background you've described, although it seems like it doesn't kind of suit her where she is, I think one wouldn't have happened without the other. I think she embodies that person, like the phoenix from the ashes.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I think, or is it just that Shirley's actually there's so many people with that level of talent and poise and intelligence and relevance, and Shirley was one who happened to work hard enough and get lucky enough at the right time that we saw her. And actually there's hundreds of kids growing up in either Tiger Bay or Splot that would had the goods. On the front cover of Ebony, so which is like pretty iconic, and her race was often part of the conversation, openly and surreptitiously, which is why they always go from Tiger Bay, because that carries lots of I don't know, there's more texture to Tiger Bay. You're not just going, oh, if people say, oh, it's from Ynys Môn, it's what it is. But Tiger Bay, you're going, it's rough down there, it's full of sex workers, and you're making, you're casting aspersions, which is why I was sort of slightly reticent to talk about some of the darker parts of her past, and having a child quite young, because the press made a big deal out of that, because they then equated it to how she's very sexual on stage, isn't she? And she's full of innuendo on stage, and it's like, yeah, she's great at selling very sexy songs, but that doesn't mean that she's anything other than a really, really good performer.
It's not her words, is it? She's very quiet about that. She's never kind of talked about that. So it's hard to kind of put a narrative on someone else. But I think it is because she's fascinating, and it's a really hard one, because I do agree there's so much talent that's unfound, and a lot of it is luck. But in amongst all that, just statistically, there's got to be those people who just they just are that, something you'll never teach, you'll never be able to fake. And yeah, there's an intelligence and a wit and a charm.
The press historically have made a really big idea about how sexual she is, and how provocative and sexualize her, which is a classic trope when it comes to black women, that they are overly sexualized and only made, like, why is no one talking about her voice like they talk about Barbra Streisand's voice, but they're talking about how sexy, it's all about that stuff, which I have to think that her race plays a part in that. Her first husband, we now know, was in the closet, and the sort of conversation around it is that she really loved him, and because understanding wasn't great then, she was like, oh, I'll it'll be fine, we'll work it out, as in he just needs to fall in love with me. And people just didn't understand that, like, that's not going to happen with a gay guy. So they had quite a they did get divorced because she became pregnant by someone else, and he's like, well, I know I'm not having sex with you. And then that first husband sued the guy that that they think got her pregnant, Samantha, her second daughter. So she married again, but there was all that going along, and there's just lots of tragedy. He went on, after they'd separated, not as a result of it, but he went on to take his own life. So just a life surrounded by tragedy. Her second daughter, Samantha, died at the age of 21. She was found in River Avon in Bristol. The case was reopened in 2010. Because they thought it might have been a murder investigation, as opposed to what they thought was a suicide. Dame Shirley Bassey has said she doesn't think it's a suicide. I just think her life is just so plagued with, like, deep tragedy, and to sort of be this serene figure of grace and humour and fun and campness is in the face of all that, and to like, they might all come out later, but all the showbiz stories I hear about, she comes across very well in them. I think that's quite something.
When I think of Shirley Bassey, I know I just signposted you to the song I Who Have Nothing. It's like her and Tom Jones are the two people I've heard sing it, and I'm not sure it can be sang by anyone outside of Wales. It's incredible. But she had a variety show in 1979, and which, by the way, is a dying art form. I love the idea of someone just presenting their TV show, then just bursting into song. That just has to come back, like Cilla Black, amazing. And I think of her in this white, she's got this white, like just thin straps, like just a real cool, classy dress on. And the microphone's about 7 meters away from her or something. It's just this wall of sound, just absolute control and poise in in this voice. And it doesn't match what's happened in her life. And I find it, without kind of trying to delve too deep, I find that so interesting. Like, we see these amazing women who seem just like the epitome of strength, but what they're dealing with privately and personally.
And I love that her life artistically is, the thing is that she's sort of like, men are disposable. Like, the vibe from her songs are not like, because she loves West End as well, so she sings lots of big musical numbers. And it's not like, as long as he needs me. It's nothing like that. It's like, oh, see you lads. Like, it's all about best foot forward and you know, the boss of her own life. And I just think she's incredible. And I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but the best cover in the world is her covering Pink's Let's Get This Party Started. It's amazing.
Meddwl, Shirley Bassey yn fel rhywun dwi yn nabod fy'n llawn bywyd. So ers o'n i'n ifanc, just nabod eich wyneb hi, eich llais hi, a ddim yn really gwrando I cerddoriaeth gan Shirley, ond dyma pam iconic mae hi yn, dwi'n meddwl. Dwi yn meddwl eich dillad yn just anhygoel. Mae hi'n wastad yn edrych classy, held together, eich gwallt yn just perffaith iawn. A just fel drag hefyd, pobl pwy sy'n fi yn edrych up to, yn meddwl, trio harder. Be di harder?
Anodd.
Na, ddim yn meddwl hon. Ond, dim ots. Trio harder I just... Ddim yn gwybod, ti'n gwybod pan ti'n cael diwrnod cachu and just neud ei gwall o dillad and just teimlo well straight away. So, mae'n power yn ceredig eich hun. Ddim yn make sense o gwbl.
Be di ceredig? Do you mean walking?
I'm trying to say look after yourself of being kind.
Oh, yeah, ceredig. Yeah. I thought you said perthyd or something. I was like, yeah, ceredig, yeah. Meddwl mae'n anhygoel bod hi ddim yn defined by hi'n dim Maggie is like to be raised or to grow up, I guess background. No, upbringing is what I want to say, but I don't know what that is in Welsh. Dame Shirley Bassey, and you know, icon o'r blaen a rwan a y dyfodol, ond mae hi'n mae hi'n dechrau, I'm trying to say her start, mae gen hi llawer o trist a struggle and adversity yn o blaen, ond pan pobl meddwl amdan Dame Shirley Bassey, pobl dim yn meddwl, trist, pobl meddwl grim a cryf a, you know, gwallt mawr a perffaith a ffroc, you know, on point. Felly mae'n ddiddorol I gweld rhywun sy'n codi above like what people would have expected. I don't know how to say that really. Does that make sense? Well, I think it's amazing that she wasn't defined by her upbringing, and that anyone who can kind of like, and I'm very wary of being, you know, patronizing about the Tiger Bay area and the people who live there, but people who are able to, I don't mean that when I say this, but that she was able to transcend the circumstances of her upbringing. And by that I mean extreme poverty, violence, you know, becoming a young mum, all the stuff that being a, you know, dual heritage, all the things that would have knocked her down endlessly, that she picked herself up and became this Seren that we know today. I think I've got like whatever the version of big dick energy is, but with your height. So people meet me and they're like, "You're tiny," and I'm like, "Yeah, I just give off the height of someone who's pushing 6 foot." I've got the like arrogance of someone who's like, "Oh yeah, I can get things off a shelf."
I need some big dick energy. I'm like really apologetic for any space I take up. I'm like, I'm sorry about my own tits.